Good evening. My name is Laura Claeys. I'm the audit partner that was responsible for your financial statement audit this year. And with me today is Josh Vieth, who served in the role of the manager. So he was supervising all of our staff during that engagement. We're very pleased to be here this evening to present the results of your 2019 financial audit. Included in the board packet that you received electronically is a copy of the June 30, 2019 basic financial statement, which is a very large document, your federal program audit, as well as a letter to the Board of Education with informational items for your review. We completed our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, and based on our procedures, our review of your processes and your policies, and then our tests of your year-end balances, we're happy to report that we rendered an unmodified or a clean opinion. So as a board member or a community member, that's the highest form of assurance that you can receive on your financial statement audit, and it means that we're not aware of any changes that would need to be made to your financial statements in order for them to be presented in accordance with all of the accounting rules and regulations. We'd also like to congratulate the administration and the Board of Education on the receipt of the ASBO Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting for your June 30, 2018 financial statements. It's always a year in arrears. And so what you do is your financial statement includes a lot more information and statistical data about the district and the community in which you operate than a traditional school district might. It takes a lot more effort to provide that, but it also gives a lot more information to the reader of the financials. So typically this meeting you present a plaque. The plaque hasn't yet been sent out by that organization, but you are still in receipt of that award, so we want to congratulate you on that as well. And then finally, even though our graph presentation won't talk about it, we did perform a federal program audit, and we're happy to report that the testing of the programs that we utilized had no findings with result of those. And so you spend just over $2 million in federal expenditures. It covers about 20 different projects, and it's really important support to the district, but also requires that you adhere to the federal regulations, which, as you all know, become more and more stringent each and every year. So with that, I'm going to turn your attention to the graph packet that we distributed today, but you also have it electronically. I'll have Josh cover some of the highlights relative to the general fund, which is your primary operating fund, and then we'll wrap it up with some key highlights.
Good evening, Board. As Laura mentioned, we're going to focus this presentation on the general fund. Looking at the first slide, we're looking at the general fund revenue and other sources. Total revenue for 2019 was around $92 million. The largest source of revenue is state revenue, and that's the state portion of the foundation allowance or the per pupil funding, as well as other categoricals. That made up $45.7 million, or around 49.7%. One thing to mention that is important with the state revenue is that this includes a piece that comes from the state that is then paid out right away to the Office of Retirement Services. It's known as 147C. So that money this year was $6.8 million. And to think of it, it's really an in and an out. So it's included in your revenue and expenditures, but it's not really operating money for the district. The next largest component of revenue, the largest component is local revenue. That's 39.7, and that's primarily property taxes. Next, federal revenue of $1.8 million is your reimbursable grants, and that's primarily special education funding. And then interdistrict revenue made up $4.7 million and is mostly Act 18 distributions from Oakland schools. The next graph looks at general fund expenditures and other uses by function. So total expenditures were $92 million. As expected, the majority of expenditures are spent on instruction and instructional support. So that amount this year was $65.3 million, or around 71%. And last year, that percentage was 70.7. So the percentages are very consistent in that area. And then the other categories, the percentages of expenditures are consistent as well. On the next slide, we're still looking at expenditures, but this time by object. So it's really how was the money spent. The most significant amounts were spent on salaries and benefits. So that's the orange and the teal pieces of the chart. That made up 83.4%, and last year it was 83.9%. So again, very consistent, and I think expected that that's where the funds are going to be spent of the district, as the most significant costs are the people. And then as a reminder, that 147C money that we talked about coming in and going out, that $6.8 million is included within the employee benefits amount. And then on this slide, on the next slide, we're looking at an analysis of general fund balance. Really what we're gonna do is this takes us from beginning of year to end of year fund balance. So starting the year at $20.4 million, revenue and other financing sources of around $92 million, and expenditures and other financing sources also around $92 million, resulted in a current year change in fund balance of a decrease of $22,000, which resulted in ending fund balance of 20.4. And I think one thing to highlight when you look at the current year change in fund balance, it's not presented on this screen, but within your financial statements, there's a budgetary schedule that compares your original, actual, and final amounts. And the variance between what was budgeted and what was spent is around 1%. So it's a pretty small variance when you look at it in the big picture. Then looking at the bottom of the graph is the components of fund balance. Non-spendable makes up $187,000, and then assigned fund balance of $775,000. This is the amount that was budgeted in your original June for your 2020 original budget for what's projected to be used next year. And we realize that that amount is probably going to change throughout the year as you have better information and you update your budget, but that's just where it was when, when we do the financial statements. And then unassigned fund balance is $19.4 million. One thing to look at with the unassigned fund balance is to think about it as a percentage of expenditures. And right now that's around 21.4%. And if you think about that in terms of how many weeks would that allow the district to operate, it would be about 11 weeks worth of operations. And then the next graph is displays some information on the retirement funding for the MIPSers expense. This is showing you the gross amounts as well as the net amounts, and then the gross rates and the net rates. And you can see that over time that graph has continued to creep up, and the state projects that that will continue for some time to come. These percentages are only the employer portion and do not represent what the employee would be paying into the system and what's withheld from their paychecks. So the gross amount, that includes everything. The net amount is what the district is paying without that 147C money.
Okay, and just to wrap things up, so we talked about the numbers, we talked about the year-end results, but really we wanted to commend all of you for the work that you do day in and day out when you're adopting budgets and you're deciding how the district's financial resources will be spent. So you've always taken a long-term view as to how you spend the money, and you look to say, what do we need today, but what do we also need to plan for in the future? And that's allowed you to make smart decisions, allowed you to have the fund balance that you have, which puts you in control of the destiny of the students in the district, because when the state makes changes, they generally make them immediately. And if you've got some fund balance, that does allow you the time to make the decisions that you need to make and to implement them versus having to make them very reactionary in nature. So we commend you for that. And that's that long-term view that you've always talked about when we've sat with you and you talk about how do you plan. The strong financial results that you have, it really does take the entire district and the community to make the results the way they are. So the people that are here day in and day out, they've got to be on the same page with all of you and the strategy that you're trying to implement. So we congratulate all of them as well, who may not be here today, but they are part of the financial success of the district. And really with the state being uncertain as to how they're going to fund districts and the fact that it is funded via enrollment payments each and every year, again, having that fund balance does give you some stability, in order to make decisions on a more measured basis. So we just want to congratulate you for that. Thank you for allowing us to be here and serve as the auditors for the district. We'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
I just want to say it's not really a question, but I just want to say thank you to Tina and all of her team, to Karen and all of her team, to Mary and all of our employees. It's extraordinary that we can be in this position. I thank you.
You're here. Yep.